Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Tanya Boyd. Tanya is the Chief Creativity Officer at Inspire Creativity Consulting with both the PMI and PMI Agile certification. With her extensive experience in project management and team dynamic, Tanya will be guiding us through the Tuckman model and how it can help improve team effectiveness. I will hand it over to Tanya to take us to the presentation. But before,
All right. Thank you to the Central Illinois chapter, and thank you to the Los Angeles chapter for partnering and for having me tonight. I appreciate it. I love having the opportunity to do these and be with different groups. So, what we're going to be talking about tonight is pretty much all about teamwork and how the Tuckman's model actually relates to that. We're also going to go through why teamwork is important, touch on who was Bruce Wayne Tuckman, talk about the different stages of Tuckman's model. Then we're going to talk about each different stage in a little bit more detail, how to identify the stages, and then how to shift to the next level if you're stuck in the stages. We'll talk about some of the triggering conditions that could happen, and then the stage slippage and wrap up. Okay, so even starting with teamwork, just as a basic concept, I mean, I think it's something that we all learned when we were in grade school. I know for me, like a lot of times when we talk about projects or teams, we tend to think so much in the terms of our day to day and our actual jobs, but teams are all around us, like even the collaboration between the two chapters, the volunteers that are on the board that find the different speakers, launch the technology, do the strategy, do the planning. The boards are constantly changing every couple of years because of just the dynamics and the elections, but those are all teams. So I just want y'all to think about this as we go through this. And also, just kind of a side note, I did put some polls out there that you're welcome to take at any point in this. We're not going to launch it at a certain time, but it's something that y'all can take as we get more into it. So, like I said, teamwork comes into play on the job, in the school of our children's school with their teachers, the PTA, in our own family lives, our doctors. If you're having health issues or you have family members having health issues, that's a team that also needs communication and coordination. And then, of course, the volunteer activities. Okay. See. So, some of the benefits of teamwork. By having an actual team around you rather than being an independent operator all the time, you help to have a sense of community. It can also help you in your personal and professional development. It helps for quicker execution of ideas. True story, when I was first creating this presentation back in 2021, I wound up having to bounce it off of a couple of my friends just for feedback because I knew, okay, I need feedback. I need to let somebody else lay eyes on this and tell me if I'm going in the right direction and help me with my ideas. And then teams actually help us to enhance our problem solving skills and boost our creativity. So coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. As we go through this, you'll see how this quote translates really well into how Tuckman model plays out. Okay, so about the man who wrote it. Bruce Wayne Tuckman was an American psychological researcher from New York. It was in 1965 he published his theory known as Tuckman's stages of development, which really set the standard for how teams develop. And this model recognizes that groups do not start fully formed. That's important. I think a lot of times we're like, we're going to join a job, we're going to join a team, and right off the bat, everything is going to be perfect. No, it's not. It usually takes a while to get trained, to learn the ropes, to figure out how to communicate and work with other people. My fun fact, for some reason, I just found it entirely entertaining that the man that wrote this Also developed a 32 item procrastination scale that measured the degree to which people will procrastinate. And also interesting, he was an avid runner that wrote the novel Long Road to Boston. So kind of two irons in the spectrum there. All right, so getting into Tuckman's model. So the application of it can apply to teams because when leaders or project managers understand this concept and know when to recognize when it's going through different stages, they're better able to help manage the team dynamics and anticipate challenges. You know, it also helps them to emphasize the importance of addressing and resolving conflicts early. You know, when you start on new teams, people don't all work the same. So being able to sense or pick up when there's some sort of a division and get ahead of it is super helpful. It also underscores the need for clear roles and responsibilities to prevent confusion. And then it just addresses that different leadership styles are needed at different stages to help lead effectively. There's a whole lot of talks and information out there on the different styles. And I've found through my experience, you know, usually I'm more coaching, motivating, pace setting, but there's times when conflict arises that we have to put on different hats and really be a little bit more authoritative on how we set down the guidelines and guide our team through the challenges. So, and this provides a framework for teams to reflect on their progress and areas of improvement. So, some different insights before we get into the cycle itself. Teams may go through multiple cycles several different times. You know, they may revert, new people come in, the dynamics are totally shuffled. And then different cultural backgrounds can influence how teams progress through the different stages. You know, and I'll speak to that briefly. You know, with PMI, we are a very, very, very global organization. You know, PMI was formed 55 years ago and it's across multiple countries. You know, so not just different ways of working, but even languages, even customs. So having respect, having empathy, being patient, and trying to get to know your team and how they work best is super important. So this model, it doesn't just apply to in-person teams, it also applies to virtual teams. There's stages like the forming and the storming that there's probably more effort that's needed from the leader than when your teams reach more of a performing level where they're, you know, self-organizing and they know what to do. It's the beginning stages that are a little bit tougher. And then teams with higher emotional intelligence tend to navigate through the stages a little bit more smoothly. And one important point, the storming stage, which is your super conflict stage, is not a bad thing. Sometimes having disagreements and differences of opinions is a way to really highlight things that we need to pay heavier attention to. If we're having those conflicts within our teams, think about it from the stakeholder or the client side, what they may be questioning or what they may be thinking. So it can actually lead to different breakthroughs and creativity if managed well. Okay, so getting into the first stage, this is the forming stage. It's really constituted of the introduction of team members. There may be an orientation or an induction to an existing team. And the primary focus at this point for people, even on the managers, is helping people to learn the project objectives, helping them understand their roles and responsibilities and where they fit into the bigger picture of things. And for people that are first joining a team, you know, I'm definitely an extrovert, but most of my good friends are very introverted. And I know from them when they join the new teams, they're really not speaking up immediately or interjecting themselves or their opinions. This is that forming stage where They know they're new. They're trying to size up everybody else. They're trying to figure out their place and how they're going to fit into things. And then there's definitely when things are first getting started, there's a tendency to be on the best behavior to avoid any kind of conflict to make sure that you're going to be accepted in that new role or team. So different things to, help your team that's new to bond. Just introduction ideas, icebreakers are great. For me, whenever I'm coming into something new, I always appreciate when it's led where people let you talk about yourself, get to know others, and don't just focus so much on the work at hand immediately. So some of the different things that I've had in my past with different jobs, there was one of them in particular when I moved to Lafayette. It was after the pandemic. I was on this team. It was a mid-size healthcare company. And we had about 30 or 40 people that were in the IT division. And every Friday we'd have coffee chats at 9 o'clock. So it was all virtual, but they did a really, really great job of picking a fun topic, whether it was like, tell us what your walk-up song would be, and we just got to share songs on YouTube or talk about what you're barbecuing this weekend. And it was great. It was kind of what the team needed to get to bond and feel comfortable. So just doing some of those things in the end, and I've shared some different ideas here, definitely helps to get to know your team members. Okay, storming stage. And I also wanted to mention, I've got help from the team helping me to moderate the chat if there's any questions. But as we go through this, you know, we are still going to have time for people to interject in the middle before we get to the questions and answers. So if any of you want to share experiences, raise your hand or come off of mute. Feel free to do so. So the storming stage. This is where the team differences are apparent and conflicts start to arise. Can be caused by a multitude of things. It could be disagreements over the tasks, the level of effort. It could be questions about the authority or leadership. We probably have that a lot as project managers, especially since project managers typically are not the head CEO. We're the influencers. We're not the boss, but we have to motivate other people to be responsive and responsible and do their duties without us being in charge of their paycheck. So I've definitely faced times where, as the project manager, I've had people in other divisions say, why are you bothering me? You're not my boss. I don't report to you. So there may be perception too that other team members are slacking. I've seen that happen before in teams where it causes conflict and people just simmer or gossip. They don't really confront it head on, but it's like there's dissension beneath the surface. And sometimes that's very tough to pierce and get to the root cause. And then because of all of these different things here, sometimes you're in a role where you're faced with managing people that have managed to divide themselves and they're off in sub teams where this one's talking about this one's talking about that one. And there's not a clear understanding of what the project needs are and the goal. So, some different ways to shift past that. Basically, don't leave confrontation unchecked. There's a lot of different ways that you can frame this or you can talk to your team, rather than just saying, what's wrong? What's going on? Y'all tell me. You can step into it or go to a trusted ally and say, hey, I sense that there's some different things that are going on. We want to make sure that this project is on track. You know, are there any things that are happening that really may be blocking you from what you need? And again, it's been my experience. Like I've definitely led the stand-ups in the 15 minutes where it's, are there any blockers? no. And sometimes you get out of that meeting and 2 hours later, you find out, oh, there was a bunch of blockers. Maybe they didn't have their coffee just yet to be ready to discuss those. But, if your spidey sense is going off, try to find a diplomatic way to confront the conflicts and work towards compromise or resolution. Bring the group together. If you've got dissension, just ask for their different feedback or point of view. And then just practice empathy and patience and tolerance for different perspectives. That's there's always going to be some disagreements that rise, but how you address it and how you help to guide or lead people through can make all the difference. Okay, so I'm going to stop for just a second and ask if there's any questions or if anybody wants to share maybe a storming experience and how they navigated past it.
So I'm sorry, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hi, I'm Rita, and my team is going through the storming stage. So the challenge, of course, is, and actually we're going through storming because I'm a new PM. So we have reverted back. The team, of course, had their own stable way of working. But me coming in and not having project leadership for a while, we've reverted back to storming, and I understand that that's normal. Like evolution, you may revert back.
Right.
And so, what's been challenging is especially with, you get through the niceties of the initial stage and you start getting into storming and you feel like friends are starting to turn into foes.
Mhm. Yep.
I feel like, yes, it's important to not let it go unchecked. If you sense something is wrong, you gotta go and talk about it and nip it in the bud before it grows. But I mean, I'm here to hear about any other tips you might suggest to smooth that phase over a little bit better.
If there's other allies that you have in the organization, because I have had to do this at multiple levels. I've had to learn to accept in my life that not everybody is going to like me. And there is sometimes absolutely nothing that I can ever do to change that. I've had people, whether it's something I've done, whether it's their own bias towards me or whatever I did, you know, I've been met with resistance that I'm not breaking through that iceberg. But I remember, and it was a different healthcare organization, but I had a manager did not like me, but she really liked one of my other team members. And I was very close with that team member, and she and I worked together really, really well. And it was something that I needed to present a risk that was going on and get an executive decision on it. So I honestly wound up just telling my, can you talk to her? Can you help on this and at least place this in her ear? She will listen to you. And that actually helped. And then in other organizations, it was so matrixed and so many different, factions of it that in that instance, I did have a manager that really liked me, but she knew who the difficult players were. So at least I had an ally in her that I could talk to. So if you're not getting it from your team directly, because you've said that they've been there for a long walk time, they had what they consider to be a stable working environment. You're new, you came in, they felt disrupted. If there's other allies that you have within the organization that can go to bat for you or help to run interference, that may be something that would be helpful. Or
So
even
like
just
their direct, like their direct reporting managers.
yes, sometimes I've had to do that too, especially being a project manager. That again, it's your project management. You're not the boss. You're not the ones cutting their check, and it's an awkward position sometimes because a lot of times we have to be the person to raise the red flag, and people feel like they're being tattled on personally, and it's really, I mean, there's cases that sometimes it is slacking, but sometimes it's okay. So we slipped on this certain date and we're in the middle of development or whatever industry. I know we missed this one. Could you project how long you think it's going to take? And I've had instances where it's like, if I knew, then I'd just tell you. Okay, we can talk about this in a different manner or figure out a way that we can sort of project scenarios. Um, so I hope some of that is helpful, but just even thinking through the allies and the organization, and then a lot of it too, just to trying to build the bridges in the relationship with that team, even if it's some of the tactics of forming, of being a little bit more informal and just talking to them to create goodwill sometimes helps. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for asking the question too. So the Norman stage, that's kind of when things smooth out a little bit, the team's starting to notice and value each other's skill sets. Um, something that's worked out really well for me on this, even in project management, is on teams, they're like, okay, well, you're creative, or I need an idea on this, or I need this. And then I've tried in teams too, whenever I start getting to know the players better, I try to highlight their skills too. Like I've never done web development. I've got a photography site, but I paid too much money to get somebody else to do it, because I don't know how to do it. But that's the value of the team. And so sometimes building goodwill, even when people start to notice the skills as leaders, acknowledging them or highlighting them, or saying, Arena, you did a great job with kicking this off at the beginning and getting us all acclimated. Things like that go a long way. And so when you start doing that, the trust develop between the team and they become more confident in one another and their own capabilities. Communication might get a little bit better as the team settles in the groove. I just joined a new team where I'm going to be doing like educational instruction coming up. Still waiting to find out a lot of those different dynamics, but we've had 2 meetings so far, and on the second one, I was like, "Okay, I feel like we're talking now. This is a little bit better." But in that role, I'm not their direct project manager, but I noticed the difference just on the second call that once they gauge people, they're a little bit better. Then at this stage, it might be the stage where the team leader is able to let the team divide more tasks without delegating to them. And then the team resolves more conflicts more readily without having to escalate it to leadership every time. And then different ways to even kind of boost or enhance that further would be to offer peer-to-peer learning opportunities. So I'm in a lot of different places where they did lunch and learns, but we brought in outside people. And I always felt like I appreciated it more whenever it was like peer to peer with people within the organization where we have an opportunity to learn what finance does, what accounting does, what this group does, what web development does. It gives us insight into kind of the overall big picture, so having that as project managers is huge, but it also helps our team members too, because I think a lot of times we might work with teams that just want to stay in the bubble. They're not in the project management, so they don't care what everybody else is doing. But getting them to understand only enhances your team, because then if they're having to build something or having to work with these different parties, it can enhance that. Um, so promoting emotional intelligence within the team, or even just asking questions or ideas to help trigger brainstorming. I know for PMI teams, and I know that we did this in the Baton Rouge chapter. A lot of times we just have these meetings and go, okay, if our members aren't telling us exactly what they want to hear, how do we find speakers or how do we find something interesting project management is a wide world. It covers a lot of different industries. It's not just technology. How do we find speakers from different walks of life, different races, different genders, different experiences, different voices to help expose all of our members to that diverse mix and how big learning can be. And then set appropriate goals and realistic plans to help empower them to make decisions. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room that has worked under extraordinarily unrealistic goals that you're not going to hit because the goals that are placed are just, it's not realistic. So if that's that opportunity to be a little bit more agile on your teams or have an approach that encourages sustainable work, then that's a great thing to do. And like I said before, just recognizing people's efforts and being generous with your encouragement and also constructive feedback. And this is another area that sometimes constructive feedback can be a little bit tricky because we've all got our own perceptions or ways of thinking what's constructive and what's insulting, where I just went through a difficult conversation. As goofy as this may sound, like even Chat GPT with the wording, I'm a communications, English and journalism major, so I felt like I've got good training on that. But even having the tool with AI, whenever I have to approach somebody with what is going to be a more difficult conversation, I've started going, okay, I need to talk to somebody about this. Give me some very diplomatic ways to approach this that is more constructive and won't harm the other person. So there's those tools out there too that you can put those kind of conversations in and get some really, really good ideas. Okay, so the performing stage, and I'm just looking at the time. I think we've got about 15 more minutes left before we go into the questions and answers. So this is the stage where the team is really in a state of flow. I don't have any timelines on this on when people might reach this, but this is usually for teams that have been operating together for some time. And even if there's new people, they're good with that mix and they know what the requirements are. Communication is very transparent and conflicts are compromised through, our conflicts are resolved through compromise, not my way or the highway. And there's a heightened sense of ownership and accountability on the team. At this point too, once people reach that level, they may get a little bit more open to cross-functional training, learning new things and taking on the various roles and responsibilities. So, and their attitudes are open towards new ideas and creative solutions. Just want to ask, from anybody in the group, have y'all been involved in a team that has hit this stage and successfully maintained it for a decent duration? And if so, I'd love to hear the experience. If not, too, we can certainly talk more at the end as well and open up the forum. Okay, so some different tips to sustain performance if things are going really well. Offer volunteer opportunities outside of the office. I was glad to hear from Christopher that he actually works with Pamela and that she encouraged him to be on the board. I thought that was cool. And even the fact that y'all are talking like that as a team at work and sharing these different opportunities, I think is important. Encouraging continual learning. This, sometimes with AI, it's really, it's wild to kind of think that, oh my gosh, that was really only sometime last year that it got released into the wide open, where it's something that all of us are talking about. I mean, I know it's been in the mix and going on for a long time, but the level of the wide usage, I mean, I feel like there's a constant learning curve, both with that and then also because AI is so accessible. To me, it makes learning emotional intelligence and actual conversation that much more important too. And how do you balance and mix the two together? You know, and then just like I said, to sustain performance, creating those cross-functional cultures where people know what the other people are doing, and it gives them a better idea of, if that was ever my stakeholder in the future, or if I ever got a project with this particular division to help enhance their programs or their, you know, legacy systems, I can maybe share these ideas with them that I think would work for that group. And so just even utilizing team recognition programs. All right, so the adjourning stage. This doesn't always happen, but this is the fifth stage. I've definitely seen teams that you don't technically adjourn from a project, it rolls on, and sometimes they don't actually capture the lessons learned. They just kind of keep rolling along. But if you've got the finite end to a specific project, it is always good to submit the final reports for project closure. Ask each team member, not just one or two people, what was their feedback? What went well? What didn't go so well? What are collective ways that we can improve in the future? And then just document the different lessons learned. Tie up any loose ends on the project. And then, of course, you reflect and celebrate with your team, and then release the team for any other project duties. So that's the 5 stages. But with that said, I wanted to go through just different things that could actually trigger these different stages. You know, and I feel like I should have done the wording a little bit darker on this one. But in the forming stage, could be a new hire, could be a promotion. It can be the same person that you have known for years, but all of a sudden they're bumped up and they're a senior manager and you're still at your same level. I have seen those promotions totally rock the ship and like change the complete team dynamics, you know, because of perceptions on that. So promotion, role change, resignations, you know, when there's layoffs, you know, just I've seen people too, the team dynamic changes when there has to be cuts to their team and the morale completely dips. And then if you're a project manager that you're still on and you're on with this team that survived the layoff, but then they're dealing with the fear of, is it going to be me next? And why did they cut that person? That was a great team member. Those are all things to be aware of, think about, and just, if you know it as a risk that it could change your stages, it just helps you to proactively think about things you could do in the future. And of course, mergers and acquisitions, vendor contracts, even temporary absence. You know, maybe it's a subject matter expert that they have a sickness in the family, or they're sick, or have to take extended leave. You know, so that can be under the forming stage. Storming stage could be caused by an unclear vision, different ways of working, different personalities, competitions, or even fear of job loss. Um, I've seen people intentionally stall on a project because they don't want the project to be over, because they don't know if they're going to get a new contract. So it's easier to stall and not get the work done than it is to complete it and potentially be out of a job. Of course, we talked about conflict resolution a whole lot, different risk tolerances. and then just different cultural differences and generational gaps. I mean, that's a huge thing. I've been seeing a lot of different speakers out there now talking about just differences with Z, the millennials, Generation X, and then just even the baby boomers. Everything has changed so much. So how do we break through to those people and win them on our team and help to influence them? And of course, stuff like politics, personalities, communication preferences, and styles. Even having your communication plan together and understanding how people work, whether they want just a message, a text, an email, or if maybe they're time boxing and you've got developers that do not want to speak to you for 2 hours because they are in the middle of a flow and you only check in at these certain times so you don't disrupt their productivity. So, Norman, it's clear goals, increased trust, more participation, enhanced focus, and of course, less finger pointing. I think that's a lot of our goal is not to be the scapegoat and not to scapegoat everybody else. And then of course, when you're performing, there's more collaboration, more brainstorming, idea generation, and then just overcoming conflict. And dissent is actually encouraged to talk about things and figure out how to get through it. And then your adjourning stage, the completion, project termination, and reorganization. So. Okay, and then just things to keep in check because this is all of us. Work is very important, projects are very important, and I need to go back. But so is balance, so is your health and the health of your family, and then just having a future career. So with that, because I know there's, we talked about stage slippage, that there's actually things revert. It happens. The teams toggle between different stages as new circumstances come up. And the goal of this is to motivate you to focus forward and keep growing through the challenge of change. So. And just remember, and as we wrap things up, so we're in this together, and together we can face any challenge through our combined strengths, and our differences make us stronger. By valuing each other, we can thrive. And just also knowing no one is alone. Even the early conversations before we started the presentation, it was shared, that someone is studying, and I have to look and remember your name. I apologize. But studying for the CAPM, and then Arena chimed in on her experiences too, and the differences in the test. So just remember that in project management and PMI, whether you're leading a team, having difficulties, whether you're studying for the exams, this is a huge organization, and there's a huge community of people that you can ask questions and get feedback. So, and this was some of the original resources that I used. If y'all are motivated to find this one and study more about Tuckman's model, I looked up very much in finding somebody who compared Tuckman's model to the Agenders and the Avengers. Yep, the Avengers, yeah. And so that was actually really, really educational and fun to watch that and think through it. So, and I just wanted to mention too, that these slides will be shared with the team afterwards, as well as the recording. So all of those can be emailed as well. All right.
Thank you, Tanya, for this fantastic presentation.
Thank you. And I'm just going to leave it up for a second. This is my LinkedIn QR code, and I can also find it and drop the other one in the chat afterwards as well, if anybody wants to connect and keep the conversation going. So.
Yes, if you have a QA question, you can feel free to either unmute yourself or type them in a chat.
And now I can see y'all better. Let me see.
This was a great topic. And for me, there's just so much going on within my current team. So hopefully you will share the deck, right?
Oh, well. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But this was
So
a great topic, very timely.
I think it's something that we all struggle through. You know,
Hey,
Tanya,
Any
Tanya.
question?
I do have a question, yeah, I do have a question, Tanya, Ingrid. This is very timely to me, and I'm just wondering what your experience is or what your thoughts are on when you have a team that all of a sudden has gone through a bunch of turmoil, like your SME being strategically moved, new people being put on the team that do not know what they're doing, a bunch of stuff that is going on, and then you have a particular person who is in charge of the team who all of a sudden is just like, you guys are supposed to all of a sudden be performing at 1000% like there has been no disruption. And I have no words, like no words.
right.
And I'm just like, you cannot really be serious, but I know you are. And, like, has that happened to you? I mean,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
your thoughts
Oh,
on
yeah.
that?
I wish that there was this super project manager pill that I could give to myself and everybody else to know all the answers, but I mean, I don't. It's just experience winds up being the best teacher for all of us and just going through it. Um, my hope for the future too, because I think a lot of times project managers get stuck in the trap. They're in between the team that doesn't directly report to them. And then they're working with the CEOs and the executives that don't want to listen to them. They've hired them to do the job, but they don't want to take the advice and they don't want to listen. And I've heard a lot of stories, especially recently, that, well, if the team doesn't like it, they can just go find another job. While that may be true, that is not the healthiest perspective, in my opinion, because losing team members and constant churn and constant new people not only costs so much money, it keeps derailing the team, the bottom line of the organization, the financials. It shreds things. So I've been thinking a long time about like managing up and trying to find, again, I'm going to use the word diplomatic, ways to educate the executives on what project management is, emotional intelligence, teams, different team dynamics and ways of work to try and create healthy working environments that are productive. But, I've definitely had my experiences where I've seen it's not feasible, so there's times that it's like, it's so tough because we're like, did I fail? How do I put this as a win? I had a project years ago that I was working at a PMO, so I was managing like 7 or 8 projects at a time. One of them implemented very successfully, but then the administration changed. And under the new administration, everything that I had been tracking from the metrics of the successful project that had implemented was undone. They undid everything. So it's like we had 2 months of tracking. And so I had no way to put it a KPI or anything like that because it was like they undid everything we did.
Right.
So it's tough. But they need training just as much to keep their teams together because I do. I feel like their jobs are at risk too. If the team just leaves and nothing happens, it reflects as badly on them as it does on the team and the project managers. And it's a kind of a tough economy for everybody right now. So,
I would add, Tanya, when you're getting those unrealistic expectations from above, it feels like they're just trying to will it into existence by just saying it.
yes. Yes. So if there's data to back it up, I mean, and sometimes there's not, because when you're doing a lot of different estimates, sometimes you don't have a baseline. Maybe it's you're working on a project that hasn't been done before. And even like the one I do on Swamp Tales has almost a fictional thing with bridge building. But just think about this too. Like think about North Carolina, think about Florida right now and the recovery that they're going to have to do. And so even if people have done disaster recovery before and rebuilding the infrastructure, there's so many variables on that that they can kind of throw out some different numbers and some different estimates, but it doesn't always go according to plan. It doesn't always go according to time. And then if there's another Mother Nature weather condition, then that disrupts the whole thing and puts everything back further. But if there's any data on y'all's projects, like if it's an IT project or something that's been done, sometimes having that with executive management helps. Or even running like what if analysis, or even like that, I'm trying to remember how to do it, but even in project management, because I haven't had to use it in years, but the optimistic, pessimistic, and realistic formula that they've got, where you brainstorm, okay, best case scenario is this, if nobody's sick, worst case is this, and try and buffer it back that way. Sometimes that data helps to support, and even, I don't know, just thinking out of the box, even using ChatGPT, if you can do it in a way that you're not putting in any proprietary information, and ask it about similar projects, but give it as much similarities to what you're working on without all the specifics, it might actually have data you can use for basis and other projects of similar scope and size and time duration.
I also noticed someone made a comment about how their experiences at the performing stage rarely last long. So I'm wondering, because, when you have, can performing last long when you have changes in team members?
If you've got a very, very mature core team, it's a lot of it is a maturity level too of the organization. And that's been my experiences with that have been very, very different. I have worked in some extraordinarily low maturity organizations, and then I've worked in some that I would not say super mature, but they were getting there. They were working on it. They were kind of opening their minds to studying more and trying to learn more. And that definitely went a long way with helping. So that I can say the team that I'm joining in the educational, just from what I've seen, seems to have a lot of maturity going on and a great organization with what they're doing. So I'm very hopeful with that. But it's, again, weekend, it's like, well, I'm still very much at the forming stage. So we'll see in the long term of things. But yeah, I think it's a very tough stage to get to and sustain for a long time.
No
I
other
think it's
questions? Was there a question? Looks like we are good on questions. Let's see.
Okay, if I would like to remind everyone about the great resources we have available for exam preparation, thanks to our training partners with Illinois chapter. So please don't forget to visit our career development section for information. On the screen.
I'm sorry, did somebody say the deck would be shared or not?
Yes, I'm gonna email the team afterwards.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So,
Um, I would like to take a quick moment to share an exciting volunteer opportunity with PMI Center Illinois chapter. We are currently looking for a director of publicity sponsorship to join the team. This is a fantastic opportunity to help shape the future of our chapter, expand your network, and obviously make a contribution to the project management community. If you or someone you know is interested, feel free to scan the QR code on the screen or visit the volunteer section or your PMI account to find more detail on the position. And you can also reach us, and we'll be happy to connect with you with more information.
Help me out, guys. If you are local, especially, I need all the help that I can in the publicity space.
you have been doing great with marketing on this. Y'all have so many channels. We've got the Facebook, we've got the Instagram, we've got the LinkedIn. We don't we don't have the others. We have the YouTube from a couple of years ago where we've got presentations, but I remember when you started this, you went all out. Like,
Yeah, we've won quite a bit in terms of our footprint on social media and also everything that we're doing, and especially with 2025, we want to staff the publicity office so nothing, falls through the crack, because we want to keep the momentum. So please reach out to me and come help out.
We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Stay tuned for the updates, and thank you for joining us tonight. We have like a member orientation on the 15th, in the October, in November on the 19th, and in December. And also we have on the 13th December, the end of the year bash.
So save the date.
Definitely. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
thank
Have a
you.